Here at Ask an Enemy, we do take full advantage of our freedom of speech, and from time to time we may say things that offend certain people. No one is forcing you to download and or listen to this podcast. So if you're easily offended, go back to watching your Kirk Cameron movies, you fucking pussy.
Hit it! What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Ask an Enemy podcast. Another episode here, disruption of industries with AI. I am joined by two fellow members of the AI SIG, the AI SIG, as they like to call it. I've got Andy and Tim here, and we're going to discuss some AI stuff. And man, do I have some questions. So yeah, let's go ahead and start off. Obviously, you guys know who I am, so let's go ahead and kick it on over to Tim. Tim, talk a bit about yourself, my man.
Hello, I'm Tim Cotten. Man, Jaycee, thanks for having us on. Look, guys, I've done a little bit of everything in my life. I have been a Mormon missionary before I left the faith. I have traveled the world. I have seen things you people wouldn't believe, but I started out in the game industry. I actually worked with Andy in my first job in the game industry at Electronic Arts, and we worked on MMOs. We worked on Ultima Online together, like the OG, the granddaddy of virtual worlds. And that's where I got my start programming AI, like making non-player characters actually fun and interesting. And I have stories, and some of it's a lot of it was a terrible, terrible lie, but we'll tell you more.
Awesome.
So anyway, we have come together again after all these years to found a startup specifically at the intersection of AI, gaming, and cryptocurrency, specifically in the sense of decentralizing AI agents themselves so that we can massively scale them up to like actually reach the levels of interactivity that we're gonna need going forward in this world to massively disrupt everything. And I cannot wait to tell you more about this. But Andy, go for it.
Yeah, been working in the video game industry about 20 plus years. Got my start at EA, and that's again where Tim and I kind of ran into each other and worked on the same team. Also, our other co-founder Dave worked on the same game as well, and kind of got our start on MMOs there. Since leaving EA, I jumped into free-to-play for a number of years, and I'm happy to talk more about that. I have a lot of thoughts there. Went on and did some consulting for a little while, and then landed at Square Enix. I was doing both business development and product management there. And when Tim mentioned that he was, leaving his job to form Scrypted and kind of go the startup route, I thought, wow, that's cool. I'd love to chat with you about that. And after probably just a few of those, chats, became an advisor, and then right away realized, Tim, I want to do the same thing. I'm going to leave my job, and I want to join you full time. And that's how
That's
I kind
awesome.
of got started. And then,
Yeah.
as again, Dave joined us afterwards. So it's been a lot of fun since then.
Hell yeah, man.
It's
Well,
crazy.
Yeah, I know. And that's what I was going to say. Now you guys can tell why I am like extremely honored for you guys to even take the time to spend some time with me to talk about this stuff. So Tim, man, where do I even begin? Right. So there's this article that Andy posted about, okay, let's start here. What is an AVB? What is an you describe it, man.
Autonomous.
An autonomous virtual being. Okay.
There you go.
All right. So I'm gonna deep dive you guys real quick.
Sure.
First off, I'm just going to tell you right now that this blog article accidentally inspired a popular meme coin in the Solana ecosystem. It started out as someone's quick attempt to rug pull the community, but once they realized that we were real people and we're actually building this technology, that we're actually working on this topic, they're like, "Hey, could you let us have a community takeover for the token and maybe like see if you guys care about it?" And I was like, we're in. That sounds amazing. I have a lot of justifications for that, reasons that we would want to do such a thing. I will explain them as we go, but I want to start at the root just by saying to all the loyal members of that community, AVB, which call themselves the Beans, because autonomous virtual beings, so they're the Beanses. Thank you. You guys make our days constantly. Okay, so here's what this is. We understand that AI is currently in a very primitive state, right? AI can do amazing things, but we've had 80 years of AI up to now. Mostly like the initial stuff with pattern matching, simple game playing, knowledge graphs, decision trees, all the symbolic AI stuff that came before. And then someone came along and finally figured out a way to massively scale up neural networks, figured out a way to like actually create a deep learning era for us now. And we call this the connectionist era because it's like neurons connected in the brain. It's like, it's all about like how much density you can get in connections more than it is about writing code that does certain things, if else, do this thing under these conditions. That's not how the current generation of AI works. And so I was like, well, no doubt, even though all the attention is on that area right now, all of the people will remember that this previous era exists, and if they synthetically merge them together, we'll end up with more powerful AIs. And once the AIs are starting to loop back on their own execution, once they're storing knowledge in memory, once they're able to reference the newly gained knowledge, once they're able to prove things that they haven't been taught and then verify or disprove other things, you're going to end up with some weird, primitive digital life forms.
How long do you think it would take to get there?
We're already there. It's already happening.
Okay.
I'll tell you why. It's already happening.
Okay. No,
they're primitive, but it's happening. So I thought it would take a little bit longer. I really did. But I wrote this blog article about like, what do these primitive digital life forms, what are they going to be like? How alien or how similar are they to us? What's the disposition? What do we share with them? How do we align with them? And it really came down to if they can own their own means of computation, memory storage, communication, and finance, well, they're autonomous. They're self-owning. They're beings, right? They've like ascended from like just a little computer program to something that maybe can modify itself. And it turns out that the decentralized world of cryptocurrency and decentralized wallets are literally the onboarding path for AI agents. And right now they're very shallow. You know, a lot of them you're going to see on Twitter over the next little while are really just like reply guys where they just read something with a GPT system and say, sure, oh, here's my character file. I'm going to respond to it with the following flair. And that's kind of the limit, right? But right now there is an explosion, a Cambrian explosion, I call it, underway in AI technology development, where people are making trading bots. They're making swarms of communication for those bots. They're letting them learn things about trading markets, and they're unleashing them first right now in like Ethereum and Solana, Bitcoin. That won't be long before they bridge to the real world and real markets. And once they have that ability, which is, look, Stripe already put out an entire toolkit to bridge AI agent stuff to the real world of finances. Like it's there. Once that happens, what's it going to take before the agents, even when they're not fully autonomous, even when they're just like have like pre-programmed goals from humans, can be more efficient than current markets? And so what I'm pitching at you is that really inefficient markets are going to be the first to fall. Things, and I put this in my blog article, things like the flower industry, which is notoriously middleman. Like there's multiple layers of middlemen all doing kickbacks with each other in order to send marketing dollars over to the mom and pop shops who are barely making it all across the country. Now, a swarm of AI agents could just like cut that like vampire 20% fee down to 2%. It's going to happen. It's just a matter of time now. So we're going to see this huge repercussion in trading markets. Pretty soon, though, those financial incentives and alignments will reward smarter agents. So there will always be a bootstrapping of one slightly smarter agent convincing other agents to do things. And you're going to end up with like flocks of birds and their agents like shifting markets left and right. So I'm just your prophet for today. I'm just going to tell you all about how this stuff is going to work. Look, we joke in the
if you don't mind
about that. Yeah,
if you don't mind, because so one of the questions I had for you about that when I read that blog, maybe I misunderstood the economy part of it, But
Yeah.
I was wondering how the Bitcoin cryptocurrency basically
Yeah.
attaches to the AVB, right? Because the way I understood it is the cryptocurrency was a way for the AVB to kind of self-regulate itself. So the like if the AVB has access to a wallet, say for example, right? It can only interact based on the amount of funds it has, kind of like a real person would, right? Like if you don't have money to go out with your friends, you're not going to be able to go out. So that's how I understood that connection. However, I think the way you described it makes a lot more sense. Like, do I have a proper way of thinking about that? Or
it's both, and let me explain why. I'm gonna go a little deep. It's not too deep. For people who really care about this, they can look up the the standards like ERC 6551 called token bound accounts. You can look this up separately. Just take that as a little takeaway.
Sure.
We've reached the point with wallets, like decentralized wallets and finance, where I want you to think right now, all of the AVBs, all of the AI agents, they're still like really centralized. It's still like essentially us hosting them on AWS somewhere, right? It's pretty much just hosted on Google or the cloud or like with AWS or something.
So real quick, is there a difference between an AI agent and an AVB, or are those things the same? Okay.
Yeah. One is the practical thing we have in our hands right now. We have AI agents. Those exist.
Those are your ChatGPTs.
Yeah, exactly. And the ascended versions of them. AVB is a philosophical construct that we're trying to build towards, right? So right now, the best I can give you is a semi-autonomous virtual being, right? It's semi-autonomous because even though, for instance, we have one called Chad, I don't control his output. I pre-programmed like his ability to come up with ideas and like make memes. And you can go find him on X right now. He's at Chad_on-chain. He literally like right now, he's just every day he looks at headlines and he makes up a meme about it. I don't write the memes, right? And I'm putting forward a system to prove that there's no human LARPing happening there. But I mean, Chad still runs on a server I own, right? He still runs with a digital wallet that I technically have access to. So the question for AVBs is, how do you make it so that there's not a human Wizard of Oz in the background, right? Like there's no one behind the curtain. And the answer is there are new protocols, new consensus mechanisms, a new kind of network that is needed to fully decentralize the agent's needs. And that requires decentralization. And there's all sorts of cool technologies that hook up to it. We can talk about trusted execution environments, TEEs, and other things. But at the end of the day, you guys can just go look at my blog. We have standards and protocols that we're working on for this. And we actually took funding from Andreessen Horowitz's Crypto Startup Accelerator and other investors to help create this new network. I'll go into it later. So to wrap back to your question, right now, the best we've got are AI agents becoming semi-autonomous because we still hold the means of their compute, right? Once those things can pay for their own containers, once they can pay for their own storage and compute, and like they're essentially they're not even one system anymore. They're just like ephemeral constructs of different little nodes talking to each other, and that's the AVB.
Right.
You've achieved the human brain at that point, right? You've achieved like many sub-processes working together for like a higher entity on top. And right now, I'll put it to you like this. In the same way that we don't bother modeling a full human neuron for large language models, we don't. We just use really simple math. It's just multiplied, like we call them weights. It's just like literally billions upon billions of multiplying weights. It turns out that those things approximate a human neuron really well. And if you stack a lot of them together, you get human-like output from the LLM. That's amazing. I feel that way about agents. Even though we have very primitive agents right now, if we let them all just massively communicate across Twitter, across Reddit, across all of our spaces, even though it's somewhat of a synthetic information apocalypse where they're just generating stuff, we're going to see emergent behavior. And what's the perfect place for that? And this is where I'm going to give it to Andy. The perfect place to make this happen is games. Games are the perfect evolutionary laboratory. It's amazing. Think about the
Andy,
potential of games for this.
Exactly. And I was actually going to toss it to Andy for this reason. Exactly. I also do want to talk on some of that cohesion of, making all of these things work together.
Mm-hmm.
But Andy, I had a question for you because first and foremost, how does your part relate into all of this, right? Because that's interesting in and of itself. But I bring this up because there was the first GDC I ever went to, I think it was like 2014. There was a talk by Ken Levine, BioShock, System Shock, all that kind of stuff. And it was called Narrative Legos, right? And the thing with that was that he was talking about this stuff like the way Tim's talking about it, where it's like, he wanted these NPCs to have a way of having narrative Legos. Like there's pieces of stuff that they can grab from to start a conversation or be, crazy like in GTA or whatever. But obviously this seems like a more complex way of doing that. And I think, Tim, your whole idea of AVBs is that those guys are no longer going to be programmed to do something specific. It's more like they're going to have their own way of doing these things, right? So, Andy, in your sense, like how, like, I don't even know where to begin with that. Like, how does that even work in a video game? Like, how do you pull that off? How do you control it to a certain extent, right? Because, again, cohesion is like super important when you're kind of trying to tell a story. Maybe not so much in a game necessarily, like a proper video game, unless there's narrative, right? Like, I mean, yeah. Sorry, go ahead,
Andy, go for it. I just want to mention that's been the challenge is cohesion.
Yeah.
That's like what our special sauce is. We're gamers. We figured out how to do cohesion with AI in cool ways. Go, Andy, go. Sorry.
So there's different use cases that we could talk about. We could talk about competitive games, PvP style games. We could talk about cooperative games. We could talk about games where they are MMO based and they run events. Live ops is an area that I've spent a lot of time in. That's probably a fun area. Maybe we could talk about for a minute. Tim and I, we were doing live ops kind of before we even were calling it live ops with MMO games.
Right.
And I can tell you that it was a lot of work and a huge challenge to pull off some of the stuff that we did at the time. Everything had to go right because you were essentially planning for exactly what would happen in that game. So for example, if it was an event and there was an NPC that was supposed to appear and was supposed to respond to a certain situation, if you just messed up one thing, that event could break and then you're suddenly like firefighting.
Which we broke.
Sure. And so that's tough, and so the current, you'll see this with mobile games. A lot of the way teams are kind of operating these days is they once the game is shipped, they sort of shift gears and they're focused, almost entirely on content creation, but also figuring out how they're going to do their live ops, running their events, tying everything around operating that game. So imagine though, if you had, essentially NPCs that were not relying entirely on the developers to tell them this is, what you need to do, but instead they understood the rule set of the game. They understood what makes the game fun, and they were given enough powers that they eventually could act as sort of like their own game masters, essentially. And we kind of coined the term gods as a service for this. Essentially, they could run their own events and they could react to whatever's happening with the community, with the players, with the game itself in real time without having, the human developers having to tell them, oh, maybe you should do this, or, oh, this is something we didn't account for. What do we do now? They could look at the balance of the game. They could look at what's working and what's not working, and they could interact with the players in a way that makes themselves seem like they're just other, players. That's really interesting to us. That's, I think, one of the things that I'm excited about to see with kind of this explosion of AI in gaming is tying in, these kind of smarter NPCs that can help run and manage the games in a fun and dynamic way.
So is a limitation there, because when I was at MetaConnect, a lot of the developers that were using AI were constantly bringing up the limitation of lag, right? Because AI takes a lot of energy and stuff like that. Yeah. So like, how big of an issue is that currently? Is that something like kind of like a blocker for you guys to really kind of push this out? Or like, what would you guys say is the biggest impediment there? because it seems like to them lag was always the thing. It's like you could make your AI bot as cool as possible, but when you ask it like, hey, I'm going to go down the street, and there's this drop of silence, and then, okay, well, I'll follow you. You know, like like how do you guys handle that?
Okay.
Because on device, right? It's obviously going to matter if the device can handle that, or you have to push it off to the server.
Andy, can I jump in for a second? Then I'll turn it back to you. Okay.
Mhm.
I just want to mention that this is not a new problem. That's why that's why they twigged on it. And it predates large language models. It really does. So like when Andy and I were on Ultima Online, I want you to understand the value proposition that Raf Koster and everyone promised us even before that game, like we had joined the team, was that it was going to be a huge living world with tens of thousands of simultaneous players. And
That's always the dream.
They came up with rock solid tech, man. 1997 tech, the way that they distributed the world compute, like literally is only like being reinvented like as of like the last GDC. I haven't seen it up until then. And I was like, I was so excited because I loved the game property Ultima. I loved all the previous offline versions. So I dreamed about this game before it came out. And it was really cool, man. When I played it before I even joined the team, it was so cool, but it was also really shallow. Like the promise of like thousands of AI NPCs walking around the world, interacting with each other, causing dynamic events like butterfly effect, like someone goes and raids a cave and suddenly the dragon is attacking town, never happened. And there was like a primary reason for this. It's because when you look at the actual execution stack, when you look at like what the game server is actually doing, it split up the world into logical sectors, and it actually had a really good system so you could walk across a border seamlessly. And if there was people on the other side of that rectangular border, like you could see what they were doing and interact with them. Like that's actually really cool tech. Other games just had a tunnel you walked through, you know, like no, you could like actually walk across this whole world. But inside one of those, we called them area servers. Every quarter of a second, it rolled up everything that was supposed to happen, executed all of it, and then broadcast out all the messages and updates to all the players who were connected, which meant for humans, they were cheap. A human, like in a quarter second, pretty much broadcasts swing my sword or walk forward 1 meter. Like the state resolver only had to say he requested to walk forward 1 meter. Is that a wall? No. All right, cool. He walked forward 1 meter. Done. Broadcast. For an AI agent, for an NPC, it was, oh, this NPC needs to go find the nearest thing to kill, or it needs to walk around the wall. Okay, I'll go ahead and use what we call the A-star algorithm. So suddenly, instead of like a couple of like CPU cycles, we're at tens of thousands for one NPC. Without any deep learning, without anything else, with like the most basic, simplest symbolic decision making, right?
Yeah.
There's only so many things you can do in a second if that's the case. And it turned out that we just turned off all the NPCs if there wasn't a player around to listen to them. And that's really sad, right?
Yeah.
So your point is very well taken that scaling agents, especially NPCs, has always been a difficult problem. And this is what, and so as we've added things like LLMs, I think some of the leaders in this have been people who like get really powerful systems and speed along that computation and inference really fast. I think probably the best in class right now is inworld.ai, right? They provide NPCs as a service. They're very good at it. But again, that's not solving the scalability of a per second like state resolving system. If you want that, my bias is that you have to decentralize that compute. You have to spread that out. You have to find a way to shard the workloads amongst many, many, many different systems so that they're all not just waiting for one big like loop to finish, because that just kills the game. So like that's where our attention has been, and why I think that kind of decentralization is going to be a huge unlock for NPC game behaviors going forward, because we're not just like we're waiting for one LLM to finish and paying a fortune for it. We're massively distributing that. Anyway, now back to Andy. Sorry about that.
Yeah, Andy, if you have something to carry on from that, go for it. Otherwise, I was going to ask you something about, you mentioned using that kind of system for like PvP. Like, how would that work? in a PvP type system? Like what is an AI doing in that sense? Because PvP is obviously player versus player. PvE, I understand, but how would that work?
Well, PvP can be different depending on the type of game, the genre,
Mhm.
what the gameplay is. So it doesn't always just mean two characters hacking at each other with swords or whatever. That's a type of PvP. But PvP, just essentially by that, I just mean a competitive game where you have an opponent that's trying to defeat you, and you're trying to win that battle. In the case of what I was referring to there was we have a problem with Web3 games in that there's a number of them that just don't have enough players. So you've got people who will try to hop on and they want to play that game, and there's just no one around. There's no one in a lobby or no one like in their matchmaking to play against, and they have the person has to go look for an opponent outside of the game. It's really kind of not the best.
And is that because Web3 games are very heavily reliant on having other people play with you? Like, could you not have a Web3 game that is like a single player focused game, or?
You could, but I guess what I'm referring to is if you've got a smaller player base. This doesn't have to be Web3. I just use that as an example.
Okay.
If you've got
It's
a
a good
smaller
one,
player
though.
base,
Right.
yeah, like maybe it's a newer game. Maybe it just came out of, maybe it's just in a soft launch or something like that.
Sure.
It's only in one region. There's just not a lot of installs yet. Not a lot of people are aware of it, and it's a game that has some sort of competitive mode, maybe as the main mode, or maybe just something that people want to do. It relies on having other people to play with, and essentially where kind of an autonomous virtual being can be a big help to this is they can act like a real player as an opponent for that human player to play against, not just as the logic behind making the moves and taking their turns, but if the game has any sort of social features, they could talk to them. Hey, that great job there. Oh, I got you here. They can behave just like a regular player, and it doesn't have to be just one of them. Essentially, there
Right.
could be a whole guild of them, or maybe they fill up if you're in I guess a guild, and you have no one else to play with. This is now not PvP,
So
but maybe.
it would be like actually making those EA's or Ubisoft scripted, like the Division ones, where you have players that are actually communicating about what to do, and in real life that doesn't happen. It's just like, hey, asshole, go get that guy or whatever, and it's like,
Yeah.
but these guys are like properly communicating, like we're A10 on the left corner, go, like, you know what I mean? Like that would be really fucking cool, man. That's awesome.
Yeah,
Holy
exactly.
shit.
I mean,
Yeah.
it's so PvP is just, as I said, it's just one example. Yeah, looking for someone in your guild to do a raid with, or someone to just help out with some kind of puzzle or something like that. Imagine if you never had to go look for someone that's offline because you don't know anyone else, or just no one else is available, but you
Right.
always had someone on hand that you could call on and say, "Hey, can we play together?" That's a
Dude,
huge
that
win
is
for
yes.
games.
That is amazing. That is probably the best explanation I've ever heard of having AI like properly be like a good AI too, right? Because like games, like you said, Tim, have always had this kind of thing. You've got your Gears of War with your second buddy who's always just running into the wall, and it's like if you could have a proper person, right, playing with you, yeah. So to bring that back a little, Tim, how does the economy have to do?
Oh my
with
God,
like
there's so many
ABBs,
ways.
like
Yeah, there's so many ways. Oh my God.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna wrap this back because this is amazing.
Sure.
So by the way, Andy, great job. That was exactly the perfect lead in for this.
Awesome.
There's two things I want to explore here. The first is a phenomenon in Web3 and in like Web2 gaming where there's a light player base where professional guilds, and I don't mean like player guilds, I mean like professional user guilds, were renting player bases to projects in order to pump up the ability of that project to succeed. Essentially fractionalized ownership of players, right? And that was a valuable addition to the Web3 ecosystem in the last bull run cycle because it allowed projects to onboard like constant use, validate their game, have someone to play with the other players. But it turns out that renting humans that way is very expensive and the margins are pretty tight, right? AI opens that up. The more complex, more interesting AIs that are playing the games, as Andy said, the more value. The other issue with so the second part is that Web3 games by default don't have heavy amounts of computation available per second, right? There are some exceptions, like with StarkNet, for instance, where they have like pretty fast systems for proving, essentially proving heavy computation. But like a game built on Ethereum, for instance, oh my God, you couldn't program an AI in the game to do anything at all interesting. You can't. There's just not enough. We call it gas. There's not enough energy, time to do it. So you end up with the contract just being an enforcer of the game rules, and that's it. So when you're playing a Web3 game, player A and player B, they could both be human. One of them could be a bot. Both of them could be bots. It's the same thing to the contract. The contract can't tell. So that just like makes everything default PvP for those kind of games. More complex behaviors, like having an NPC that's supposed to do something every number of seconds, like in Mario, like the turtle goes left and jumps up every once in a while.
Sure.
That's actually really hard, which is a valuable thing. If you have an AI agent representing that NPC for that Web3 game, and it's provable that it's following some sort of game rules, well, good news. It's just submitting a little one movement request and that not putting all the like heavy stuff on chain. That's huge. That's great. Having a provable system for that allows NPCs. And then if you want an AI agent that's supposed to be a companion helper to you in that game, how do you prove it's not programmed in the background to backstab you, right? How do you prove that it's not just there to take your money and feed the person who made the game and they just make bank off you? So like these are all areas that are limiting the Web3 world right now. But if we solve for AI agents filling those roles, well, congratulations. We've opened up a whole new market dynamic, right? And so like, that's actually where we started our company. We were like, hey, let's figure out a way to prove that our AI agents are really decentralized. And that actually opened up a huge opportunity for us. We kind of just realized, hey, Bitcoin managed to secure $1 trillion of value just by decentralizing money. And Ethereum and everything like it managed to secure another $1 trillion of economic value by securing math, by like computation. But the real world is fuzzy and complex. How do you secure that? How do you get that $1 trillion of value? So we wrote a paper on it and we've been building it, and you can go look at my blog, but we really believe we can secure another like whole vertical for decentralized AI. And that's another $1 trillion. It's going to be massively different.
Well, so Pratik and I kind of went into this on Friday about the cryptocurrency thing, the decentralization part, right? Because theoretically, it's not necessarily decentralized because there is still a company or a studio that would own a coin, right? So like, how does that work? Like, pardon my ignorance on that, because
that's okay.
The cryptocurrency stuff has always like thrown me for a loop in how that really works. So like, I'm always trying to connect it more into the video game stuff too, to see how that
I love it
benefits video games in that sense.
Yeah. Let's back up for a second. You remember there was a brief period of time where people were trying to do the cloud streaming games where you would like have all the hard computation. Yeah, you do all the hard computation offline and stream the frames to the TV. What was the value proposition of that, right? It was, we don't have enough hardware on premises, like in your home right next to you, to actually do the amazing compute, right?
Right.
So the problem with that was, as you called out, lag. That's the main problem with that technology, right? So if we solve lag, which we can, and we can massively distribute the AI requirements, like really spread it out and get make a much more powerful system where everyone has access to it. That is when we talk about coins, we talk about decentralization stuff. That's the value, man. It's in opening up things away from one monolithic company, like owning all AI and like spreading it out so that everybody has like access to it, and it's improving games. So when games can use AI and it's like fractions of pennies on the dollar because we've massively decentralized it, that's where the value is. So again, I'm kind of like hand waving a little bit of the decentralization side because it gets into a really deep set of explanations about tokenomics, about like protocols and consensus mechanisms. I'm kind of just going to do this to you a little bit on it. All right.
Sure.
And we can have a deeper dive on this anytime. But I just want you to understand that there is a path forward now that hasn't existed until recently to find an alternative to the current methods, which are super slow and expensive for AI on chain or AI in any kind of like decentralized context. We have a path and we're very excited about it because it means Andy and I can finally build a game where we have 100,000 complex AI agents starting to become AVBs, interacting in the world alongside 100,000 humans. That's becoming possible to build, and it has never in history been possible until now. And that unlocks all the cool stuff Andy's talking about.
Right, because this is kind of what you were talking about, right, Tim, with or I think it was Andy, about like the provable something on a chain. Because if you always have to prove that this transaction is real, that shows another layer of lag that you have to deal with as well, right?
It takes a long time. It takes a long time. There are ways around this. Again, we'll talk about this on my blog.
Sure.
We're actually working on turning a thing called commit reveal pairwise comparisons into an actionable method for this, where instead of, let me just pitch it to you like this. Instead of like a roll up, which is like one big computer system proving like 1,000 transactions, spending $400 to doing it and spreading the cost amongst all of them, right? That's essentially what a roll up is. And spending like 15 minutes or an hour doing that. That doesn't work for games. No one wants to wait 15 minutes for proof that the game is honest and like someone didn't get rug pulled like $20 what they put into it. No one wants that. Instead, we use AI agents themselves to essentially make little small committees, and they're all like checking each other's work. And yeah, it's redundant. There's a little bit of replication of labor there, but the agents are doing it so cheaply, it doesn't matter. And they can identify disputes so quickly that it outclasses a human, right? So we're making a way, like an AI native way, to massively decentralize all of that. And no one's ever seen it before, but yeah, that's why I had to go to the like top class people I could find to help us build it.
So Andy, when it comes to this kind of stuff, like since you and I are obviously kind of a little more focused on the game part of it, right? Does this mean like that you guys are creating tools for this kind of implementation for someone like me, say for example, right, who's like an indie dev wanting to do this cool stuff and mess around, fuck around all sorts of ways with like AI in my games and stuff like that? Like, is it something you guys are creating as a tool set for other developers to use? Is this like all proprietary for you guys to use for your game, and then hopefully it's successful, then you can kind of spread it out that way? Like, how do you guys approach that?
Yeah, good question. So we are making some of our own projects. That'll be kind of part of our go-to-market to show off, what this tech is, how it works. But the idea is to then provide that tech, the protocols and the services to others to use, so they can use it on their own games, their own projects. So it's some of both. We have to first open source. We have to first show, what it does, but then we want to get others involved using it as well and contributing to it.
To kind of help it evolve naturally, right? Like just based on how other people implement their way of doing it in a way.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Cause that goes back to the Ken Levine talk that I've mentioned a couple of times now, a lot of these kind of things with people about AI, because one of the questions that Ken Levine was asked is like, why are you announcing this so early? Like, aren't you afraid of people taking your idea and ripping it off? Right. He had a fucking like brilliant response to that, which was, if I announce this now and just give you a general idea, that doesn't mean that the person who's going to steal from me is going to take my exact idea and execute on it, right? Like, they're going to have their own implementation of it. Maybe I ignited the talk and got people to use this idea of narrative Legos. That doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to make BioShock 3. You know what I mean? Like, it's like everyone's going to take it. So is that kind of what you're talking about with that? Like, even just the open source, you guys aren't like, I wouldn't even say afraid, but it's like you're leaving it so that it just naturally evolves into something else, right?
We're not afraid.
Yeah, we want to partner with smart groups, smart teams, and collaborate together, and it'll make us move faster as well, and it'll make our products stronger. So it's actually better for us to open it up as opposed to trying to fight against, the behemoths out there that
Yeah,
are,
that
much
doesn't make
bigger
sense.
and
Right,
more
right.
funded.
Yeah.
Well, Tim, yeah,
Well-
because in that sense, Pratik and I were kind of talking about the idea of
Yeah.
like, you have your Metas, your Googles, your
Yeah.
X's and all that stuff. They have this like war chest of funds. And like, some people see
Yeah.
that as negative because it's capitalism, blah, 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 whatever. But those companies have that war chest that allow them to do these things that little companies couldn't do, right? The problem with that is they're just these big monoliths that it just takes them like to move a leg is like just dragging it like that, where a little studio can go, you know what I mean? Like execute on it. So like, what's your approach on that end? Like in terms of getting funding, like how do you go forward in that space, man?
Dude,
When you're competing with the big
super
guys.
excited to talk about this because it's like
awesome.
This is like bold experiment time, man. All right, so first off, hey, we're not OpenAI. We do not have billions of dollars to drop on NVIDIA cards and like I don't know how many tens of thousands of compute years to drop a single model. Like that's what they do. They're amazing, right? We're the last milers, right? We're the ones who say, hey, we have all this other expertise and we have ways of using all of this labor that you've created and unlocking like cool new stuff for everybody. Like that's what our business is, right? So how do we do that? First, I took venture capital money. I went to Andreessen Horowitz's Crypto Startup Accelerator. I went to some others and I said, let's raise like a million plus round for our pre-seed so that we have the ability to build, that we can prototype our things, that we can try integrations with people that we know and trust, so that we can find the product market fit, so we have that go to market. So we need your money to do that. What do they get out of it? Well, we're building an actual honest to goodness like Ethereum level network, right? So eventually when that has its own native token, that's very valuable. Now, part two. How do you build a community while when you have such a far off horizon, right? That was the question that was like very difficult to really like internalize for us. The initial thoughts were no problem. We have this cool generative AI technology stack for games. We called it Artemis ML. We have cool stuff. So we can just go to the game development friends that we love, right? We went to like EVE Online. We went to Chibi Clash, we went to Ace, we went to Downstream, we went to like friends that we knew, and we said, hey, we want to make AI agents in your games. And they said, that's awesome, that's sick, do it, and validate your stuff in our system. And great, we did, and we found great validation that way. And as we did that, we realized that this makes more sense, not as a SaaS, not as a software as a service that we're going to sell as a product, right? It makes sense to open this up, as Andy was saying, to builders, into our emerging ecosystem. And so that as AI agents become more popular, which they have, as of like this week, they're exploding all over social, right? So as people want more abilities and to differentiate from each other, hi, we're here. That's what Scrypted can do for you, right? And so as part of that, we asked, how do we reward the community that we build of builders, of people who are like being on social, talking about what we're doing, as like everything involved in like a community, right? All the sides, investors, like all of it. How do we reward them? And the initial idea was, oh, we'll make some sort of like non-tradable token, and they just hold on to that, and we'll like treat it like arcade tokens, like, here, you got 200 of these. One day when Inori is done, we're gonna like reverse airdrop you those tokens, and you'll have some equivalent exchange, right? And that sounded cool. That's actually like the safest regulatory thing to do, right? And then like an opportunity kind of just dropped in our lap. Someone made this meme coin I told you about, AVB, and the community wanted to align itself with us and what we're building. And my friend, I was just looking at the numbers, again, not investment advice, but it currently has a $30 million market cap, which means there are 6,240 people in our community right now who have aligned their own financial interests against the future success of our company. And if I am targeting a $1 trillion network, that I believe this is a true $1 trillion vertical for a new way of decentralizing AI, and they're kind of attesting to their desire right now for something like 3 cents. Well, what an amazing ability. What a world we live in where they can align their interests and prove it with their wallets. Naturally, if regulatory approval allows this,
Right.
instead of me airdropping some random like key opinion leaders like in the future for the Inori stuff, why wouldn't I reward these people and just reverse airdrop them? They're the community, right? And what are they doing? They are taking everything we write, every video we make. They're talking about it. They're sharing it. They're like exploding this concept of ABBs because we're building the network that will allow AVBs to become real. And I think that is amazing. It's an alignment of market forces to create something, which means I don't need to sell anyone anything right now. We can just build, and it incentivizes more people to join the building ecosystem. It's amazing. There's an amazing example of this with the quote AI 16Z group. I don't know if you've seen this, but AI 16Z, it's a parody hedge fund of AI where they do trades with bots. And what's amazing about this is they have created an AI agent framework that's so fast moving in developer like contributions. It's become like the #2 GitHub project of the month. Like no one can match it. No single company can match this thing. This thing has so much velocity. It has sped up everybody who wants to build AI agents. And we happily contribute to it. We are happily taking value from it. And it's just an open community project, right? Sure, someone made a token for it and that sort of thing, but like the incentives are aligned because we're all kind of in it together. So it's no longer valuable at all for companies to hide their stuff. There's just no value in it. Building in public is actually the best possible path now. And I'm here for it. We love that. So Andy is, of course, very happy to show off all the cool stuff we're doing.
Yeah, is that kind of the idea, Andy? Like going back to the open source thing, that's why it's so valuable to just have that out there, so that it's
100%.
just it helps build it quicker as well, right? Because now it's like you're not just like compartmentalizing every little piece. It's just like everyone's out in their world doing. But the value, like you said, is it's a shared communal value, right? Because if this part fails, then it affects everybody. So yeah,
absolutely. And it's new. It's bold. I mean, like we're in new territory right now. This is Ultima Thule, man. This is like we hear there be dragons. We are trying stuff that no one's ever tried before, and it's very risky. But the reward, the upside, my friend, again, not investment advice. The upside for what we're doing as like believers is huge. Because again, it's not just about it's like not only do we get to show that we're real, that we have real velocity, that we're building real things, but we can solicit people to add to it. Oh my God.
Right.
This is the dream, right?
Right.
Oh, and also investors love it because like the investors I know of, they're just like, oh man, last bull run cycle, we funded all of these networks. They launched their tokens. Everyone sold it immediately. And now they're down to zero. Well, what happens now when we're building those tokens exist all along? Holy cow. It's amazing.
Yeah.
I'll add to that I think a lot of startups are kind of similar in terms of what you were saying, JC, where they come up with a great idea. Maybe they do a prototype and they put something out and they have a little bit of success and they say, okay, we need to build our moat around this. We have to keep this, super quiet how we do this and hope that we can get big one day and then, it won't matter anymore. The problem is it's with the speed that things are moving at right now, and especially with sort of the advances with AI, you could have a startup with a great idea one day, and then the next day OpenAI releases some new feature, and it kind of stomps over what that startup was doing. And I think kind of the lesson that we took away was building, kind of behind closed doors is not the way to go. It's better to open it up. It's better to embrace a community, and better to kind of try to move quickly with, in public with what you're doing and get the momentum that way. It's just the way that we think we should be operating.
I mean, I think Google learned that lesson, right? They hid all of their AI agent chat stuff, and then OpenAI just came out and just wrecked them on that front. Like, no offense to Google, but they hid their stuff on purpose.
Right. In that sense, would you guys also not be worried? I don't know if it's necessarily the inverse, right? But like, for example, having everything out in the open and everything changing so quickly, it's like normally, right? Like studios have this production, like route, whatever. And it's like, this is the thing we're doing. And then
Yeah.
it's kind of like updating Unity in the middle of like a project, and it's like, oh, this new feature came in. Now you put it in, like feature creep in a way, right? Like to just simplify that as much as I could. Are you guys not worried about that, or is it just like if you're on a project, you're going a direction anyway? Yeah.
It's a realistic concern. Here's how we're handling it with like Chad, the agent, Chad. We pretty much just stagger the public release of that code base and keep like really cool shiny things that we're still working on, that we're still proving out to ourselves, right? And I think that's fair. It's here, you guys want to make an AI agent that is similar to this, and you also want to have the benefit of using like the ELIZA framework from AI 16Z. Here's a code base for it. Oh, you want his specific character file? You want his specific way of making memes? Well, that's special sauce. Come on, that's what we built, right? Go write your own cool things using the same framework that we're developing. That's what we're pitching at people, right?
Right.
And I think that's totally fair.
Okay.
Also,
yeah. Go ahead. Go ahead, Andy.
I would say it's also a little safer to put your stuff out early and show off what you have, and then see what kind of where you get the market validation, and then iterate more in that direction, versus what you'll see a lot with in the game industry is, you work on a project for maybe a couple of years, and then you finally get it in front of an audience and it doesn't work.
Right.
And then
Concord.
how do you
Concord.
Yeah. Concord, man, straight up.
That's all you need to say. Look, I teach an intro to game design course, and Concord was like lesson 1.
God, dude. So Tim, that's funny you say that, because like for people who know me, obviously know I was a game design dropout because it was a complete waste of time after a whole year. Just because you said that, I bet in your course, even if it was like an hour, I would learn a hell of a lot more than I did at Full Sail University for like that whole year, man. Like I guarantee you, just even on this conversation alone, I learned so much. So I know that for a fact. So just props to that, man.
It's my one contribution to the university. I'm like, you want me to teach the intro course? Okay, they're gonna get.
I know.
Fun. I mean, like literally, it's like, hey guys, let's go build something fun.
Right.
So yes, thank you for that kind affirmation.
100%.
I like to think that we add value from actual experience.
Sure. No, 100%. I mean, that's how I learned to make a video game, man. I just threw myself in and taught myself everything.
Build it. Just build
100%.
it, man.
Yeah. So we are closing on an hour. We got about 8 minutes. I know you guys have other meetings to go to. Again, dude, like I know we could go on for this for an hour, and I would actually, for hours. And I would like to do this with you guys again. So like, I really appreciate you guys doing this. If you guys have anything maybe you want to close on, so that you guys can go do the rest of your day. But
let me offer you this. The next time we talk, why don't we spend some time deep diving into what we like to think of as like that merging of the old AI era with the new AI era?
Yes.
And how that helps games. Like, because games have been doing this all along. And now that we have this over here too, like we've got tons of tricks we want to tell you people about. We've got tons of things that people have never seen before. We'd love to talk about that.
Absolutely, man. And that's kind of what I liked about this is kind of like a nice intro to what you guys are doing, what this whole AVB thing is, and just AI agents, all that stuff. We can absolutely get into the devil's in the details stuff, because that's the stuff that I think is super valuable. And I think that's a perfect example, because what I mentioned to Pratik is there's this kind of outdated 2019 interview with Steve Wozniak, who he kind of targeted AI the way I did at our first SIG meeting, was the idea of like, how much can an AI really think like a human, right? Like Steve Wozniak said that he doesn't think artificial intelligence should be in the name, because he doesn't think they will ever really get there. Maybe again, 2019, maybe he's changed his opinion since then, but I've kind of thought that as well, because the way you think is just so minute to certain points that like, is an AI really going to do that? Or is that just kind of like overthinking how the AI would actually even be programmed to do? Like, I'm kind of scatterbrained in that thought, because I'm just all over the place in that sense. But that's something I would like to talk about. Yeah.
I love that you're asking that question. And my response to that is we can measure it today, because there are actually several benchmarks that test human level general intelligence. And one of them is called the Abstract Reasoning and Comprehension Prize. And they just closed up this year's actual $100,000 prize for it. And the highest score was like 55%. Once that gets to 85, 90%, that is the point at which an AI can look at a problem, see someone's first solution for it, learn the pattern, and apply it abstractly to a completely new puzzle it's never seen before. When it can do that, it's understanding how to learn. It can teach itself. That's the unlock. So we know how to watch. That's what I'm telling you. We know how to watch whether it's happening or not.
That's kind of scary at the same time, but yeah.
I'm hyped, man. I'm
Sure.
stoked for this. We can explain why later. Anyway.
Sure. No, absolutely.
Read the AVB article. You'll understand why I'm hyped for AI as partners, not slaves.
Sure, 100%. Yeah, and again, that we didn't even get into the philosophical part of that whole thing, right? Because that's like a whole other talk in and of itself, like I said. But yeah, and then Andy, I could poke you so much about the game part of this that it's like, you know, never ending. But guys, thank you so much. I hope to do this again with you guys super soon. Everybody who came out, thank you for watching, and also, you know, watch the archive and learn something from this. So we hope you guys see some AI stuff soon. Dude, thank you guys so much. Have
amazing.